Hello, welcome to the live stream. At least one person is already here. Hi, David. Good to see you. We are, we're here. Things are happening, I guess. Today's topic is recession and recession indicators, which I did from a pop culture perspective because recession indicator but kind of became like a TikTok meme for a while. I think it escaped even like TikTok containment, where people were saying that everything was a recession indicator, like skinny jeans were a recession indicator and wide leg jeans were a recession indicator and, you know, certain kinds of people working as baristas were a recession indicator. I mean, you really, like, everything could end up being a recession indicator. But now we're going to talk about actual recession indicators. So the things that economists use, the things that the National Business Economic Research Council Business Dating Cycle Committee, which is who officially declares a recession, NBER, Business Dating Cycle Committee, super understandable. They're the people that officially declare a recession when it comes to the peaks and the valleys in the US economy. And we're going to talk about some of the things they actually look at. It's sort of like the same as a credit score, which is that we know the things that go into it, but the actual algorithm is proprietary data. NBER Business Cycle Committee is not a proprietary algorithm. However, they don't want to lead investors. So, but we know what they look at. We know the basics that they look at. So I thought we would talk a little bit about that. This isn't to say, like, I use the word recession all the time, I feel like, these days. And that's because we've had a lot of weird things going on in this economy since COVID. Like, we still are suffering the consequences of how strange everything got during COVID. And now we have like a new round of weirdness that's happened. So, I would sort of say like there's been the big economic shocks have been Brexit, which did have pretty far reaching impacts. It had the biggest impacts for people in the United Kingdom, but Brexit had, it had impacts on the global economy in 2019, and it was finally done in 2020, and COVID had a lot of subsequent weird impacts on the Chinese economy, which, as the second largest economy in the world and major producer of a ton of stuff in the world, that had a bunch of effects as well, while also dealing with these kind of rolling lockdowns that went on a lot longer in China than they did in most other countries because of the zero COVID policy that China maintained for quite a while. So, which they maintained through the end of 2022, essentially, before Omicron made them give up. And then kind of the final one is Trump being reelected in the United States. And that is because Trump's method of economic policy it was weird his first term. It just didn't follow a lot of the standard ways that presidents approached international trade in the United States. It's very unique. And it has the tariff palooza, as I would call it, of back and forth, has had a lot of weird effects on the US economy. And then there's kind of the ongoing dysfunction that's been happening within within Congress and within the federal government as a result of Doge. So that has had all sorts of effects. And, as much as this is going to end up being US focused, because obviously when we're talking about a recession, we need to talk about an individual country. But the way the US economy goes is the way a lot of the world goes as far as the economy. We are a major trading partner to a lot of other large countries. We are a major lender as a country to much smaller developing economies, and we are very much a globalized economy. So maybe the only country that isn't terribly affected by how the US business cycle is going is maybe like North Korea and Iran. Those would be like who I would say maybe aren't affected by that, just because the level of sanctions that we have on Iran and the closed economy of North Korea. I think it's worth discussing these recession indicators not to cause fear or stress in individuals as far as like the constant worry and threat of a recession. You as an individual can only do so much to prepare for a recession. And just because even if something gets called a recession, if we have two GDPs of negative economic growth, like if we see our GDP negative economic growth for 2 consecutive quarters, that's what's officially called a recession generally. Just because there is a recession happening outside doesn't mean that you're having your own personal recession. And by the flip side, there are a lot of things that are going very poorly right now for people for their own individual finances, even if we aren't in an official recession. So I thought we would talk a little bit about the numbers and about how things are looking bad, but they're also just looking weird. Like one of the biggest things that we look towards when we're looking at the economy as a whole as macroeconomic data is federal unemployment data. And we don't have that because the US government was shut down for 41 days. And because it was shut down for 41 days, we did not get the jobs report the same way that we usually do. There are private data sources for unemployment data, but when it comes to economics, the data is very complicated. And because of that, you want a consistent model. And there is a consistent model in unemployment data. We have been using essentially very similar kind of metrics for measuring unemployment, I think since 1950 something. I could pull up the model. Obviously, slight tweaks have been made over time. What we're looking in particular is non-farm employment. And the reason that we do that is because farming is very cyclical and it's just a very different type of employment. David says, am I not enough? No, you are enough. It's great. You're just leading the charge. Lit by the neon light of the YouTube lamp. Yes, this is what I got for, remember when I was testing out vertical live streams? That's because I was participating in this YouTube creator live stream situation, and this was my prize. I will say in person, this looks totally red and it looks yellow on the video. I don't know why. I really don't understand it. Yeah, Aaron is looking at it on both video and in person and agrees. Where does one get a YouTube lamp? Yeah, I got that from the creator camp that I participated in with YouTube. I mentioned yesterday to someone I newly manage at work that even though retirement is forever away for him, I recommend getting the 401k matching amount. And he says he thinks he set it up 8 months ago, but thanks. Today he said thank you, and he'd set it up for the 401k to invest, but not with Paycom Deduct, so he hadn't actually done it. Yay! I'm so glad that you encouraged your coworker to do it. I'm very happy that you that I was in your ear. I was influencing you to do that. Geograph Concept says, wait, is the government open again? It will be theoretically open again. They've reached a deal. We will see. We'll know tomorrow, I believe. I have to say, I fully up to date on what's happening with the government through Sunday because I was working. Blissfully unaware the past 2 days because it's my weekend. And frankly, I think it's important to not worry about the ins and outs of congressional politics when I don't have to for work. The lamp should be vertical. This lamp? I need more information about which lamp. We have 2 donuts today. We do not have a hard out today, so hopefully you want to hang out. For some people, it is a holiday from work because it is a federal holiday in the U.S. It's just my normal weekend, so I am a little bitter. I hate it when the holiday falls on my weekend. Okay. Here is the first donut, and this is based off of, I believe it's a Dutch, it is, hold on. It's Dutch. Okay. Hagelslag, which are essentially buttered toast that you then sprinkle with chocolate sprinkles. So they made a donut version of hagelslag. I don't speak Dutch, by the way, but I feel like it's just German with marbles in your mouth. That's generally my interpretation of Dutch. So I'm just trying to pronounce German with marbles in my mouth. This one looks good. It's just a regular raised donut. I don't like chocolate, but I feel like that's probably not too much chocolate. And then this one is very decadent. It is a salted caramel cheesecake. So it has a graham cracker on the top. It's got fancy salt on the top. Then it's got a caramel cheesecake glaze coating. And then the actual, this part is like sugar and graham cracker. And the cheesecake goes through, the cheesecake is like all the way through the middle. So I can't flip this upside down because I will lose it. But it's going all the way through the middle. So very excited about both those donuts. Another double donut day. We're fully in the double donut season. So last week, y'all, I was struggling with the time change. It was like pouring rain and suddenly was dark an hour earlier. And I have never felt so bitter about the time. Does this happen every year? I feel like it felt worse last week, maybe because we had just like really bad weather for like a big chunk of the week. And I was just like, oh my God, it feels dark at 5 p.m. Hi, ma'am. Do you need to be involved in this? You need to be involved in the live stream. Do you want to say hi to everybody? Look. Oh, okay. All right. Is this just a thing you do now? This one has been very into laps this week. So is that a recession indicator? Like unicorn bread? Is that what people call hagelslag? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, David. I'm glad you're back. Sorry for your loss. Oh. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am. Very healthy to have a weekend. Hi. I feel like it's also extremely healthy to have a weekend when you work in news and the news is crazy. So, but you know what I do love talking about? Recession indicators. Are we done? By the way, y'all, there is potential that we're going to go to China in March. And that Aaron and I are going to try to speed run the Shenzhen transit system. We will see. We found killer flights for me on points, like crazy low amounts of points. And now I'm a little obsessed with this, but we are waiting on several details to be confirmed about whether or not we are allowed to go to China. I have a Chinese 10-year multiple reentry visa that expires in August of 2027. And so I've only used it like the one time when I did the Trans-Siberian like big trip. And I would like to use it again. So unicorn bread is buttered toast with rainbow sprinkles. That sounds just like Australian version of Dutch hagelslag. I like that it's rainbow in Australia because, you know, they're just generally sunnier and less austere than I guess the Dutch are. How many people can I stereotype in one fell swoop? Week before last, my boss asked me to go back to Sofia for a month. Oh my gosh. And you're in Charleston right now? I'm a little jealous that you're going to be in Sofia, but I feel like it's not a very, maybe not my favorite destination in December. Do they have Vinox marks in Sofia? I feel like they maybe have enough of the Eastern European thing in there. They might have Vinox marks. Fairy bread. Okay, is unicorn bread a thing or is it just in your head? I'm going to ask Google and then Google is going to give me an AI made up version of it. looks like unicorn bread is what happens when you put sprinkles inside of the bread when you bake it, which also does actually look really cool. Fairy bread is pretty cool looking. I feel like rainbow sprinkles might have gone better. I'm welcome to stop by. I don't feel like I've got a European trip in me in the next month. I can't believe how quickly you have to leave, though. But yes, not only did she round the corner of my head, she also deposited a lot of cat hair on me. Thanks, Machka. She's up there now. You can't really see it. Maybe if I turn on the overhead light, you can kind of see her right up there. Okay, so recession indicators. Top one, unemployment statistics. And we look at generally the unemployment number. Remember when we talk about inflation and federal rate cuts, the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate, which is to keep inflation at the target level, which right now their target level of inflation is 2%. Inflation is at 3% right now, which is a 12-month kind of rolling amount of inflation based on the basket of goods. I've done a couple live streams where I've explained like how we calculate inflation, but it's based on a set of goods that is then re-looked at every single month in order to determine how much that basket of goods it costs. And there is a couple different ways that you can calculate inflation. The type of inflation that they use is very specific, but regardless, it's chained if you want to know. But there's lots of different types of inflation calculators. But overall, does the same group of goods from 12 months ago, how much more does it cost now? And you usually want a little bit of inflation in an economy, in a modern Keynesian economy, let's say. You want a little bit of inflation because if prices are staying completely stable, then that usually means there's not very much growth. And if there's not very much growth in an economy, I know some people are supportive of the idea of zero growth economies, but the way that modern, complex, globalized economies work in Keynesian economics is that you always want to have some level of growth. And you don't want that growth to be runaway, because then if it's runaway, you get very high inflation and you get very low unemployment. And too low unemployment is actually not good. It's because too low unemployment means that it can be very hard to find workers. And so you can get what we call essentially wage push inflation, which was some of what we were seeing for a while with labor shortages, which is essentially you need to pay workers more and more in order to attract workers, because unemployment is so low, it's very hard to attract workers. And so you're paying more and more for these workers. And then because the money is flowing freely in the economy, that drives prices up because people are spending it. A great example to kind of at any time look at this on a micro scale is look at North Dakota during the Great Recession. So North Dakota was one of the only states that had low unemployment, and that is because they were doing a ton of oil drilling. And while they're doing all this oil drilling in North Dakota, you had scores of workers that were coming into towns that didn't have enough stable housing. They didn't have enough of the kind of infrastructure that you need to support a bunch of people that are there working extremely long hours. The restaurants, the laundromats, and in many cases, the sex workers. And because you would have this predominantly extremely young male unattached demographic, because that was who was willing to move to the middle of North Dakota and work 70-hour weeks in a dangerous job. So you had a lot of people come in and it drives prices up, right? If you don't have enough housing to house all of those workers, and you need them kind of immediately, then what happens is people bid more and more. That's also true if you need to do things to attract workers. So this happens a lot when you have like something that brings a lot of workers to an area that doesn't have a lot of housing. Then you'll have their companies offering to pay for their housing. So you'll see this during natural disasters, wildland forest fires. They will be bidding up the cost of housing in these areas, in hotels, in temporary lodging, because the companies are paying it and the money is all just flowing. So what you saw in North Dakota is that they had very low unemployment, but they were having lots of localized inflation. The cost of housing was getting astronomical. You would not think that some random town in North Dakota would, in circa 2009 through 2010, would be renting like a bunk bed in a single room in a house for, thousands of dollars. But that is what was happening. And the money is flowing freely. So what was happening is that other workers would come there in order to work to staff up. So they had to staff bars. And this is when a lot of both sex workers, midnight ballerinas, as we would call them, were making a lot of money by following kind of the movement of workers to these small towns, because they were just working all day and making tons of money. So they were just throwing it around. And that's like a microcosm of what it can look like if you have very low unemployment and what is called wage push inflation. It's in the economics term for it is called velocity of money. But it's a great example of how things have been so weird the past 5 years, because we had such a strange velocity of money as a result of lockdowns and COVID. Because for quite a while, we had like a lot of people were getting unemployment, but then a lot of people were getting like suddenly didn't have a job because their workplace was shut down. But then there was this extra unemployment money that a bunch of people were getting, as well as stimulus checks. And so then suddenly there were some people that were actually more flush than they were when they were working. I'm not saying that was universally true. Things were very bad for quite a while. But we were seeing a lot of money flowing around in the economy. And then additionally, the workers that didn't experience that had fewer places to spend their money. There weren't restaurants, there weren't concerts, people weren't traveling. And so we saw savings rates go up, but we also saw people they were saving more during like early pandemic, and then they were doing what some people have coined revenge spending, which is like once they finally were allowed out again, they were going and they were spending a lot of money on experiences or the kinds of things that they did have access to. Like how many people bought like a $3,000 Peloton bike during the pandemic that had previously expressed no interest in doing that. Some of it was this like, oh, you're rethinking your whole lifestyle. But another part of it was like, there was a lot of people that had discretionary income because they weren't spending in the same way. And it isn't just like entertainment. I listed like travel and restaurants and stuff like that. But one of the other things was just a lot of people were saving a lot of money by not commuting to work. Especially in America, where a lot of people commute very far distances in their car, suddenly not having to spend money on gas meant that a lot of people suddenly just had more money just by not having the commute, not to mention all the other kind of all-encompassing things that go in with going into the office, which is why they're desperate to get people back to the office, because they want us to spend money at restaurants near the office, and they need to justify their stupid buildings that they spent a bunch of money. So this is like the kind of why things are weird. So one, what you want is low unemployment, and we can kind of like inherently you can understand that. But you don't want it to be too low, because then that can have all of these follow-on effects. So this all comes back to like, what are recession indicators? Well, we look at a couple things. We look at the level of inflation in the economy. We look at rates. And that is because rates are part of this interconnected like group of all of... Did the cat unplug this? The cat did unplug this. Hold on. My computer is not charging because the cat unplugged it. Winter, yes, I agree with that. Just the cost of clothing for the office alone sucks. Obviously, I delight in buying clothing, but yeah, it's kind of wild, especially if you work in an industry where you are expected to dress in a certain way, and then those clothes have no utility to, like, how many people wear pencil skirts and white button-ups in their daily life if but then if you work, like, you know, as a lawyer or in the financial district, then you've got a very specific kind of work. Or if you work in a physical job where you have to have like really hard wearing clothes, like my friend who used to be a postal carrier, she would go through like a pair of shoes, expensive walking shoes, like every 8 weeks. Hello, hi. Would you like to say hi to everybody? Would you like to say hi to everybody again? Oh, we're just settling in. Okay. What do you think about recession indicators, Machka? Okay. I guess this is part of it now. I wish you all could hear this, but she is purring. It's right on my ear, so I can really hear it. Will you stop showing the internet your butt? Show them your face. Oh, we just live up there now. If you have not read it before, Your Money or Your Life, which came out with a revised version, I want to say in 2018 or something like that. Your Money or Your Life, very classic early retirement book, but one of the things that they do is they have you actually calculate what your real hourly wage is, but accounting for all of those costs of work, the commutes, the wear on your clothes, the wear on... there's just hair floating everywhere. Machka. I have to say, I'm a little excited for having an office where I can close the door. just also, why won't you run on the giant wheel that Erin got for you? You could get all this energy out like that. She's trying to lure me onto the couch because we've been having couch time this week. Which is, I guess, just because the time change. I have no other explanation for... Machka doesn't usually sit on my lap, but she's been into my lap this week. Okay. So, where was I before I got distracted by the cat, y'all? You have to help me. You have to get me back on track here. What were we talking about? We were talking about unemployment. Help, guys. Fairy bread here in Australia, hundreds and thousands sprinkled on bread. Oh, yeah, that's exciting. Now that we're back in the time change, I'm at a reasonable time in Australia now. I'm in a terrible time in Europe, but I'm at a good time in Australia. I'm late, but here for the joy that is Anomaly. I'm sorry to report that I don't think I have very much joy for you today because I decided to make it about recession indicators. Okay, we were talking about velocity of money, and we were talking about all the different recession indicators. So there's some other cool recession indicators. I mean, cool is maybe a broad term to use, but there's all sorts of interesting ones that are used in modeling recessions. One of my favorite ones, which I feel like is kind of a deep cut, but also heavily weird right now because of the tariffs, is inventories. So retail inventories are tracked on essentially a monthly and a 90-day basis, depending on kind of what combination that you have. And the idea is if you start to see inventories rising, then that means, and they do it as a seasonally adjusted amount because in the US, right, obviously, depending on the industry and depending on the time of year, you're going to see a lot of retailers that are going to stock up ahead of December. So they're going to have a peak, in October, November, they're going to have a peak of inventories because they're stocking up for what they view as the holiday shopping season. Obviously, there's a kind of back and forth, like in footwear, that actually comes a little earlier because their Black Friday in the footwear industry is actually the back to school season. And footwear was one of the industries that was hit hardest by the tariffs because They are almost 100% produced overseas, and they're produced in countries that had very high, quote unquote, reciprocal tariffs. I hate to use that term because they weren't reciprocal tariffs. So Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, and China are all like major producers of footwear, and they all had very bad trade balances. So they got hit with very high tariffs. Each of these individual countries has been like back and forth trying to negotiate a better deal. And some of them have landed on better deals. But the problem was that all of this back and forth negotiation that was happening to the footwear industry was happening at the time that they were working towards making decisions about how much that individual retailers for footwear industry were going to be stocking up in advance of the back to school season in August, September. And so we've got this sort of situation where we are starting to see rising inventories. So rising inventories, if you take the seasonally adjusted number and you look at this time last year, we do have higher inventories that are happening for sure right now. We won't really be able to use rising inventories or just generally retail inventories as a leading indicator until after we know how consumers are behaving during Black Friday, because one of the big recession indicators is consumer sentiment, and consumer sentiment is in the toilet. I mean, truly, we have horrifically bad consumer sentiment right now, and that's just like the vibes. I mean, that is the official term for like the vibes are bad. And consumer sentiment is bad. Why wouldn't it be, right? Like things are, it is a weird time to be living in. And the economy feels like it's being controlled by like 5 rats that are playing with strings right now just because of how strange everything is. There's a lot of stuff happening that has not happened before or hasn't happened at the scale that it is happening. And because of that, consumer sentiment, we don't like uncertainty. Like businesses don't like uncertainty, investors don't like uncertainty, and consumers also don't like uncertainty. It doesn't feel good. People also are very aware that the jobs market is not, even if we don't have the data that like suggests it's, because right now it says that our unemployment rate right now is 3%. Which is pretty low, actually. Like, there's a lot of debate on what like the perfect unemployment number is, because obviously you don't want it to be too low or too high. But a lot of people think it's around 2.5%. And that kind of represents like enough people that they're kind of transitioning, because you're always going to have some level of unemployment. There's going to be people like leaving college and going to look for a job, or leaving high school and going to look for a job. There's going to be people switching jobs. There's going to be people cycling in and out of the workforce as they care for aging parents or for kids. Like there's always going to be some friction, right? Where you're always going to have some people at any given time that are counted in the unemployment number. But it's a little higher than we would like it, but it's much lower than people feel like it is. And that's because I don't know almost anyone who doesn't know someone that's been affected by a layoff, right? Like we've seen coworkers, we've seen colleagues, we've seen friends go through these rounds of mega layoffs, and we're seeing layoffs at companies that are large names that hit the news. So almost every town, you know, you've got a major employer in the town. And I think there's almost no major employers that haven't, maybe like NVIDIA, there's almost no major employers that haven't had some sort of reduction in workforce in some way. Not to mention the combination of all the shit going on with the federal government, with like people getting terminated through DOJ actions, or the right now, like there's a bunch of people that are furloughed from their jobs, and there's a bunch of people working without pay in the federal government right now. So consumer sentiment sucks, and consumer sentiment influences how retailers prepare for a season, right? So have they done enough ordering? Are they going to be stocking up? Every kind of indication is that Black Friday sales are not going to be that good this year. I think a lot of us have felt like the Black Friday sales, if you participate in Black Friday, the Black Friday sales have been getting worse and worse for years. It used to be like people when I was a kid, people would line up outside of physical stores and get in fistfights for Black Friday deals. Now they're mostly online and they're mostly not that great. And if you are tracking them, they're often not that much better than they are at just like any other random sale date throughout the year. But the big reason that Black Friday sales are not going to be as good this year is because some brands are actually strategically just not doing them. Especially kind of higher end brands are choosing not to do them and instead going for releasing exclusives or limited edition stuff. The other reason is that we are now seeing the effect of tariffs. So tariffs are affecting the import of goods, and that is raising the prices for retailers. And because of that, they already have hiked those prices. And so even if they do discounts, it's not necessarily going to be at a level below the pre-tariff price. But additionally, a lot of them just say, like, I can't afford to do these deep discounts because I have been paying a lot for tariffs. And if you're not in the US, sure, it doesn't necessarily affect, but it's very likely that your country is a trading partner with the US. And so you're seeing this same kind of effects, right? Where you're seeing, like, if your country is a trading partner with the US and they have the US as a major customer, US firms and individuals are ordering less because of the tariffs, right? Sean Duffy called people who didn't want to work without pay problem children. Great. Great. I love insulting air traffic controllers. That seems like a really smart idea for the head of transportation to do. Hello, Iris Bear. Iris Bear was like, I don't know what you're trying to get back to. I've only seen the cat part. Oh yeah, so Your Money or Your Life does an excellent job of like kind of telling people to calculate out. I'm assuming that is a cooking timer.
Alexa, stop.
We're making a spaghetti. Well, Aaron is in my presence making a spaghetti squash recipe that I found by Googling. So I'm involved in this process. Because our CSAs are finally done, but we are not done eating all the CSA vegetables. So consumer sentiment, unemployment, rates. So rates are part of this overall thing. There's the dual mandate that the Federal Reserve has to maintain stable price levels, which they say their target rate is 2%. 2% inflation year over year. And then the other thing is maintain full employment. What full employment is not 0% unemployment rate, as I mentioned, because you're always going to have some sort of structural changes. But that impacts the interest rates. And interest rates are set by the Fed. That is kind of the Fed rate. And then it trickles down to everyone else. So when the Fed cuts interest rates, when you hear that in the news, that means that they've cut the Fed rate, which means usually they've lowered it by 0.25 or 0.5%. And then that amount is the amount that they charge banks that borrow from them. And then banks charge a little bit more than that to their best customers. And that doesn't mean you as an individual. That means really big firms. That means, prime borrowers. So that will be like major corporations that do business with these banks will get that kind of best rate. I like to call it the rate for people that don't need to borrow money. So the prime rate. And then you as an individual get a slightly higher rate than that. So there's sort of a trickle out of that. Why does the Fed cutting rates matter? Well, they will cut rates when they see that inflation is starting to kind of ease, like in coming out of this high inflation environment that we've been in. They have been maintaining this interest rates at a higher level, and they did finally cut them a little bit. And when they cut them, it has an effect on another recession indicator. And they're cutting them because essentially they can kind of take the pressure off of it off the gas a little bit, interest rates are the tool that the Fed, one of about three tools, but the most common tool that they have to fight inflation. They have some other tools, one of which they don't use very often, which is this thing called reserve requirements, which is how much money banks have to actually keep, because banks don't keep all of the money that you've given them. They lend out a ton of that money, but they always have a certain percentage of reserves so that if you come knocking at their door and you need to give them and you ask for your money back, they can give you some money. But there is a higher level of reserve requirements, which you can do if you want to slow down that velocity of money, how much money is flowing through the economy. Reserve rates are kind of their least used tool to fight inflation. So they dropped interest rates because we are seeing inflation at lower levels. And now the question is, what is this going to do to bond yields? Is anybody tired already as we've been on this journey through different economic data? So I mentioned that one of my favorite weird economic indicators is this, the inventory level. One of my other favorite economic indicators is something called an inverted bond yield. And I almost need a whiteboard to describe this, but I don't have my iPad like out with the graph maker that I can have. But what you need to know about it is that generally when you are, when you have a bonds, you will find that the short-term bonds will have lower interest rates than the long-term bonds. Short-term bonds, bond yields, like the overall amount that they are going to return to you, is going to be generally lower than long-term because you're risking your money for less time. They hold this thing called reinvestment risk, but we're not going to talk about that, which just means that like the chance that you won't get the same rate back when your yield is done on your bond. An inverted yield curve is when that flips. So an inverted yield curve is when you have higher yields on short term and lower yields on long term. And the main reason that that happens is because there are worries about inflation risk, right? So if they are expecting that inflation is going to rise in the future, then there is a anticipation that, if the longer that you are holding onto the money, the more kind of risk you're assuming because inflation will eat away at it. So when you see the bond yield curve, which is called an inverted yield curve, happen, every recession since 1957 has been immediately preceded by an inverted yield curve. So you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's this divination that we have to be able to determine when a recession is coming. No, it's just like yet another indicator. Like as much as recession indicator was a meme, like indicator, like in economics, we only really know what happens after it happened, right? And then we'll go back with data to explain it. And we keep an eye on all these different like kind of metrics. But even though an inverted yield curve has preceded all of the recessions since 1957, not every inverted yield curve we've then entered a recession. So we've had more inverted yield curves than we've had recessions, right? Does this make sense? And famously, we had a stupid long inverted yield curve for almost 2 years in 2022 because of how fucking weird things got from COVID. There was so much strange monetary policy that happened as a result of COVID. This kind of like, we were throwing money around in the economy. We were seeing these crazy high inflations. We were seeing all these supply side shocks where we were seeing it like hard to import and things weren't being produced and we were running low on plastic and pennies and all sorts of stuff. And this is, this is one of those situations where it is very hard to know if the recession indicators that we have always used are indicative of the future going forward. And, there's a lot of, I do think that people are maybe like a little more bullish on AI than they need to be right now. But there's a lot of this AI panic in the job market of like, you're seeing layoffs related to AI. People are saying that, that AI is going to replace all of our jobs. And like one of those things is that this is theoretically supposed to be this transformational technology. I wouldn't necessarily say that that is as true as people are putting out there. I'm not as bullish as certain people are. I feel like it feels a little bit the same way that we were obsessed with blockchain for about 3 years. If it is as transformational as the internet, I think what is also happening is we are seeing that a lot of the macroeconomic systems that we have set up in the post-World War II era are starting to falter in the current kind of like capitalist landscape that we are in the United States, right? And late stage capitalism is what the kids like to call it. I don't love doing that because I think I don't like staging something when we haven't agreed what the stages are. That's my but I do think it's a funny term. But the current phase of capitalism that we're in, as well as the phase of democracy that the United States is in, and many European countries, as we sort of see this slide towards authoritarianism around the world, I think there is a possibility that the way that we've been approaching economic indicators will no longer map as well towards the future. And I would love to say that the tools that economists and investors have been relying on for a really long time will continue to be valuable and will continue to pencil out. But realistically, the way that we have been looking at and the complexity of the economy that we've been looking at, this is not a fixed principle. Like economics is a social science because it changes with society, and society is changing at a very rapid rate right now. It's doing a lot of the same things that we've seen in the fall of other large empires. And I think it is very possible that the way that we have been approaching looking at macroeconomic indicators is no longer going to work. So was that uplifting? It is to say there is a lot of recession indicators that are not actually popping off right now. But when we come back to the vibes are off, I think, and that the job market is not reporting the data in the same way that we've seen it. Like this was one of the big problems with like unemployment data during the Great Recession was that, they measure it in a set sort of way. And that's the value in it, right? You always want kind of the same measuring point so you can compare the numbers valuably against one another. The challenge that has happened with the kind of general changes here is that during the Great Recession, we all knew that underemployment was pervasive, right? Like I knew a lot of people that were working part-time jobs that wanted to work full-time that weren't captured in the unemployment data. And we're seeing that kind of same thing now, but I think that it might actually be worse because of the ability to be self-employed in this economy. And I don't mean self-employed in the like, I'm running my own business, I'm a freelancer. I mean self-employed in the gig worker economy. So the people that are driving for Uber, the people that are doing some level of content creation, but that are not producing DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever it might be, but are not doing it at the rate that it equals a full-time job. But just 1 hour of that per week in whatever the reference period is when they're counting unemployment data means that they are not counted as unemployed. And I think it's very likely that we are seeing that. I think we might also be seeing what's called discouraged workers, which is essentially where people have stopped looking for jobs and they drop off the job data as well. So unemployment, as I just spent an hour listing, is not the only recession indicator. There are a bunch of different things that go into the recession, whether or not we're in a recession. I do think that the way that we've been measuring things is up for a really big discussion. The question is, are we going to continue to have the institutions that do this kind of measuring? And are we going to continue to have people in power that care about this data? Because we right now have an executive who didn't like that the economic data did not reflect the reality in his head. And so he fired the person in charge of doing that economic data. And he isn't the only authoritarian, flirty sort of executive that has done that. And we've also seen this in, with China, where they didn't like the youth unemployment statistics, which were very, very high. And so they just stopped reporting them. And you see this time and time again with command economies, with economies that have a lot of authoritarian control, that you see this kind of, the data stops being valuable. And I think that I don't think we're there yet, but I do think we are getting there. And I think we're also getting there because society is changing in such a way that maybe the way that we've been approaching a lot of this stuff in the past is not working going forward. The current administration seems somewhat hostile to all government workers. I mean, yeah, didn't they hire someone to create an agency to fire them? So yes, absolutely. I mean, this is, yeah. Oh, Warumble, I'm so sorry I missed this because this is hilarious, but buying less shit is good for the planet, and who knows, it might just counterbalance pulling out of the climate deals. That's some excellent dark humor. Welcome to the live stream, by the way. Y'all, should we eat a donut? Because I feel like that was a lot of economic data I just threw at you, and we haven't eaten a donut yet, and I feel like we should probably eat a donut. We're gonna eat a donut. Okay, this is the donut. Sorry that my desk is dirty. This is the first donut. This is Talking Donut, Eating Donuts. So since we've been talking economics, we have to eat a donut now. This is a Hagelslag. So it's a cookie butter cover, a regular raised donut, and then it's got black chocolate sprinkles. So even though I don't like chocolate, I'm hoping that this is going to be good. Because I feel like the chocolate is just small enough. Yeah, I agree. It is the exact right amount of sprinkles. It's very satisfying. Oh, there's a beetle on the curtain, and now Machka is locked in. So she probably won't be bothering us for the rest of the live stream. It's very... The cookie butterness is very cookie butter. I know these are supposed to be chocolate sprinkles, but I taste like no chocolate in them, which is good for me, but... It's fine. I'm not wowed by it. Apparently, there's a tariff calculation happening here. Would you like to take your tax? Your tax comes with a napkin, please. I like it, but I don't think it's definitely not as highly rated as last week's were, because we were very generous last week. I think it's a 3.5 out of 5. I think it's better than a 3. But I don't think it's a 4. So I think it's a 3.5. Is a cookie butter donut a donut? I think it is. It's a donut. It's obviously a donut. Winter, as far as I understand, the back pay for workers is written into many of the union contracts for workers. Don't 100% quote me on that, but I think because a lot of the federal workers are unionized. It's good enough that I am finishing it, though. Okay. Yep. I'm sticking with a 3.5 out of... I feel like maybe I should use a different color then. All right. Three and a half. Should we eat the second donut now? Or how about people ask me if they have any questions about recession indicators? Ask me a question and we'll put that as the in-between that. I don't know if I have any other economics topics to talk about. It is law signed by Trump during the first administration, but like SNAP benefits they want to get out of paying. Cool. Cool. I feel like David works with more air traffic controllers, so would probably know. I think there are some furloughed workers who are just not going to get paid because they weren't working. Okay, the Senate deal, though, said that there is going to be back pay. So we'll see what goes through the House now, I guess. Last week was the donut promised land. Not like Trump had a reputation of paying his employees as a private citizen. That is extremely true. I was just thinking about how I would just not loan him money if I was a bank at this point. Not just as executive, but like as a business person. How does he keep getting money loaned to him when he keeps not paying it back? How is this going to affect the dollar versus euro? I'm not sure exactly what this is, but like if we have a recession, how would the euro respond? The euro would have, if the recession is only in the United States, then the euro would have a follow-on effect because the European Economic Area is, the Eurozone is a major trading partner with the United States, but it would be a more muted effect. That being said, Europe already has a lot of the euro has a lot of similar problems, right? So they're having a lot of similar inflation problems. They're having kind of similar costs rising in healthcare from post-COVID. They had a lot of kind of similar effects. The only thing that they have that they're kind of not having is they have a little less chaos executively, which isn't to say that like the various European Union countries aren't having their own kind of internal political struggles, but the truly chaotic way in which the president of the United States is sort of acting right now is not reflected in the Eurozone in quite the same way. Now, let's say the Eurozone, so that's countries that use the euro, or let's just use the EU more broadly, which has a couple different currencies in it. But if the EU faces recession in the same way, I think that what is likely to happen is that they are likely to recover a little faster than the US will at this point. And that is I'm not a fortune teller, and most economists really can only tell things in hindsight, right? What I will say is that the US is setting itself up for a downgrade on its we're setting ourselves up for a downgrade on our credit rating. And borrowing money is extremely important to the US economy. Very important to the US economy. And I think it's very likely that we see increased borrowing rates as a country, especially with the constant threat of not raising the debt ceiling that we end up back in every so often. And that combined with kind of having a dysfunctional government, I think there is a very strong possibility that the US is not able to erase a recession this time using the same methods that we have before. I'm just wondering if I should buy euros sooner or wait until closer to our move. That I am not going to be your Forex fortune teller. I'm sorry to tell you. I wish that I could give you a solid answer on that. One thing that I just generally recommend is keeping an eye on the historic trading data between euros and USD, and making a choice at which point you're comfortable with the exchange rate between the two. And then you could set it so that you can automatically buy. So there's quite a few different kind of places where you can essentially put a buy order in that will be triggered when it hits a certain threshold. I mean, traders use these essentially all the time, but you can use them for your own personal kind of safety and security. So you essentially can say, like, if we hit this exchange rate, you know, if the what is it at right now? Is it at 0.83 euro versus USD? So I think right now it's at 0.83. It hasn't shifted a lot in a while. 0.86 right now. So you could say, like, once it gets to 0.82, I'm locking it in or whatever, or once it gets to 0.83. But I would base that on historical data, right? This is the thing, is that other than some like very specific peaks, we haven't, you know, we saw like some very specific peaks in 2022, which was very much like a result of kind of COVID recovery. And then we saw like weird dips in 2022. But the rate doesn't change that much. So if it's just about euro versus USD and not about like the general economy of Europe, I wouldn't try to optimize too much because it's kind of just a fool's errand, right? When it comes to Forex. So it's more about your personal comfort level. The law requires a lot of things the current administration has not done because no one is making them. Oh. I think it's time to eat another donut. I'm going to eat another donut. Thanks. I love hearing about that. I love hearing that we're not doing the things that the law requires. Cool. Another donut. Well, that's the wrong donut. That was an empty donut. I finished that donut. All right, this one is very decadent. It is a cheesecake graham cracker donut. So it's salted caramel cheesecake. So it's got like caramel cheesecake all the way through the donut. Then it's a raised donut coated with graham cracker and sugar coating. And apparently there's fancy salt on the top. Oh yeah, I can see it. There's like some pretty big salt in there. I want you to appreciate that I tried to keep it as good as possible, but I had to kind of like replace the little graham cracker when I got back once it was transported. Is Bulgaria actually on the list to get the euro in 2026? I thought they were lower down because they're they usually tell you because it takes a long time to do the transition, but I thought their debt levels were too high. Oh, yeah, it's starting January 2026 apparently. But yeah, they should already be starting the transition things. But I thought for a while that their debt level was too high. But it looks like they will. It has been postponed multiple times. Oh, interesting. Ooh. It looks like it is happening, but I'm gonna do some dive on it. Maybe you'll inspire an entire Bulgaria Eurozone, because I think it would be actually interesting to look at various different countries that have been adopted in the Eurozone. Okay, we gotta eat this giant donut, y'all. It's very if you can hear that, I like almost feel like I should get up next to the mic. Can you hear how crusty that is? It's got quite a coating. Was that ASMR or was it just a terrible sound? Okay, there we go. Now I finally got a bite with the cheesecake in it. I was more excited about this than I'm enjoying it. It's fine. I feel like the contrast of the like graham cracker coating is it to the cheesecake. I actually just want some of the cheesecake. I don't know if it needs to be a donut. And I normally say that about like the savory ones. Hey. Aaron has taken a lot of Aaron has eaten more than the normal tax. What is this, a reciprocal tariff? It's a little too, like...
Isn't it just frosting?
No, it's cheesecakey. It's like a puddingy. If the mic didn't pick it up, Aaron asked, isn't it just frosting? But it's not frosting.
It's thick frosting. Creamy frosting.
Okay, well then I guess one of the questions is cheesecake not just frosting? Thick frosting. That's what it's missing. It doesn't have that sour note that cheesecake usually has. It's more just straight up puddingy. That's what it is. And I think it's because it's the caramel flavor. I think this might actually be better as like a plain cheesecake flavor. What do we think? I am finishing it, but I'm very hungry. I did a throw jump on the ice today. I did a couple, but for the first time in like over 2 decades. So that was fun. I think you're thinking of a New York cheesecake, not a cheesecake. I mean, I only know vegan cheesecake, so I don't know if I really know a difference. Yeah, frosting is just about like how it lays. Frosting is a state of mind. This one is also a 3.5 out of 5. It's good. I finished it.
It's a donut.
It is definitely a donut by dough standards. I feel like it's just not. It's not as good as I want it to be. I'm gonna say Yeah, 3.5 out of 5. All right, let's fill this in. Someone explain the difference between New York cheesecake and regular cheesecake. It is vegan. All right. There we go. Aaron is also very hungry. Well, I think that's notable that we were hungry and we only rated them 3.5 out of 5. Or are we compensating for how hungry we are and we're rating them actually lower than we should? That's the cheesecake filling you buy in the pudding aisle. I didn't know you could. Should you keep Lev as a collector item? Do you collect coins? I mean, inevitably, I end up just having things that because usually you can't exchange the coins unless they're like a larger denomination. Yeah, I agree. It just doesn't have that like sourness that I want it to have. It is pretty good though. All right, y'all. I think that we have been streaming long enough, but if you have any other questions on tariffs, let me know. Tariffs and their impact on the recession. I am not up to date on federal shutdown stuff because I've been tuned out for the past 2 days, which is great. I guess I'll get back up to date tomorrow. I'm doing a live event too in like 2 days at Pals with the authors of this book, Life After Cars. And it's pretty good. It's very much like about all the ways that cars ruin society and like how kind of alternatives to cars, but it's not on an individual's level as much as it is on a societal level. It's pretty good. It's very, very readable because the two folks that wrote it are journalists, and it's just like they're just very good writers. It's breezy for a nonfiction read, I would say. The sour flavor is in New York cheesecakes, not regular cheesecakes. I think it's in all cheesecakes. Yeah, I agree. Do they culture vegan cream cheese? It's almost all made with cashews, so I can't have it. That's not true. There's lots of vegan cream cheeses that aren't made with cashews. Is cashews the only thing you're allergic to? If you can't have soy, then yes. But most vegan cream cheese, in my experience, is made with soy. The cashews is only like the super fancy ones. The raw cheesecakes are usually made with cashews. But you can also make them with walnuts if you can have walnuts. But in my experience, I usually make it with tofu cream cheese, which is made with tofu. Or I make my own cream cheese using silken tofu. Oh yeah, I've never had the Jell-O cheesecake filling. That might have been what they were going for. I've seen it on shelves. I'm seeing it now in my mind's eye. I always thought it was just pudding, just like that was flavored like cheesecake. Buy more tofuti, please. Oh, I forgot about your shares of tofuti. You know what this reminds me of? The Daniel Pinkwater's book about the guru kid for investing. Hold on. I'm going to find it. It's called The Last Guru, and it's a children's book. It is one harmless bet on a horse race starts a chain of events that turns a 12-year-old into one of the world's richest people and a spiritual guru. One of the things he does is he wins this like horse bet race, and then he decides to invest it in like a couple types of stocks, and one of them was for a vegetarian burger chain, and he like kind of predicted the whole surge of it. Anyway, The Last Guru is very good. I love most Daniel Pinkwater's books. Highly recommend The Last Guru, though. I think it's definitely out of print, I think, now. But most libraries, I would say, have it. But yes. I actually recommended that in one of my Slate personal finance advice columns because it was someone who didn't have a good perspective on how money would make them happy. I ended up recommending a children's book. No walnut, cashews, or pistachios. Okay, well, walnut and cashews are used in the raw ones, but tofu is used in a lot of the other vegan ones. It's quite easy. Cashews were not, I didn't really find them commonly used until in like a lot of non-raw vegan cooking until like 10 years ago. Cashews were not terribly easy to source raw because you need them raw if you're going to turn them into to like various things. You can't have them roasted, and they were very hard to source not roasted in a lot of places unless you had a specialty grocery store. Guess who went to DC for the first time this past weekend as it turned into the longest shutdown ever? Woo! That sounds fun. I'm not going to DC until April, so we better have a government by then. I'm worried we're going to be in full Dark Angel post-apocalyptic world at that point if we don't have a government by then. All right, but maybe I'll make some cheesecakes for you, David, with tofutti so that you can properly reap your investment. I booked my train ticket coincidentally, I think the same day Trump sent in the National Guard. Oh my God. The train ticket reminded me, but today, there was a discussion about me competing in adult figure skating pairs with a partner who's up in Tacoma. And I was like, should I do that? It's probably a bad idea, but one of the reasons to do it would be to go to Oberstdorf, which is the ISI, like international adult competition in Germany. It's one of the big ones that people go to every year. And I'm like, I don't know. But then I'd have to take the train up to Tacoma, which is like for people that don't know their like East Coast geography, it's essentially like 2 hours on the train from Portland to go train, or they'd have to come down here. So I like how we're all just talking about our train tickets that we're going to buy now. Well, we might try to ride all of the metro in Shenzhen, but Aaron has to get approved to go to China, which is not looking very likely at the moment. So we will see. We will see how it's going to parse out. All right, y'all. Tell me what you're looking forward to this week. What am I looking forward to this week? After this doom and gloom recession indicators episode, I mean, I do enjoy talking about recession indicators, so it's not as doom and gloom to me just because I like explaining economic theories. I hope I didn't lose you all. I didn't have a whiteboard. I feel like I need a whiteboard next time I do this. What am I looking forward to this week? Oh, I think I'm looking forward to this event at Powell's. I'm pretty sure it's sold out, and I think it's going to be a good crowd. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also getting a haircut tomorrow, which I sorely need. I hope that the haircut holds because I'm filming a bunch of TV spots on Friday. So I hope it's a good haircut because otherwise there's not a lot of time to fix it. I knew Aaron had national security implications. We can't export our Parecki technology to China. I think that's fair. I kind of just want to go to Shenzhen. I kind of want to go to Shenzhen in order to buy like house robots. I feel like we could get a lot of house robots to spy on us in China. Have I read webcomic Check Please? Yes, I even have the print version of, I think I have the print version of year 1 and year 2. I don't think I have the year 3 print version. I love her stuff. I love Check Please. It's so cute. I actually think I'm probably due for a reread of it. It's really great. So yes, adorable. Tacoma's near me. I just did that train ride a week ago. Well, we'll see. I also am considering trying to trying to set a speed run record for the Austin light rail system when I am down there in December. We will see. It looks like I have like essentially a day when I could do it. I'm trying to decide if this makes sense. I'm there for a transit conference, and so maybe I shouldn't try to do it, but B says, wait, I'm getting a haircut tomorrow too. This was the only time available, and I'd reached my end point. I really need a haircut. It's quite bad. I had some trauma from losing my hair earlier this year where I like didn't know if I wanted to get my hair cut, but now it's just unmanageable. I've been growing out my bangs partially due to aforementioned hair trauma, because usually I would have trimmed them in my house by now. And I haven't made the decision about whether or not my bangs are I'm getting them redone tomorrow or not. I think I'm going to let that go. I read Check Please as a manga. I didn't know that it was a webcomic. What makes it a manga instead of just a graphic novel? Because I don't know if I would... I think I would call it a graphic novel. Because isn't manga always Japanese, usually? Now I want to know. I'm looking forward to my new pain meds for my ankle. I'm on day 1 of it, and it's already a huge improvement. Yay! That's very exciting. I'm very excited that it is helping with it. Is it a controlled substance? Is it a steroidal kind of pain medication? That it's always exciting when you can move beyond just the naproxen. So Check Please as a webcomic was really fun because it came out, I think like two times a week, and it was like a cross cultural it was like a what is it, cross-platform? So like there were like Twitter accounts for a bunch of the characters and like Instagrams and stuff like that. It was a very cool experience to be part of it when it was like coming out live. I don't think it's coming out live anymore because they like finished year 3 and I think it's done there. But I think I'm due for a reread of it. I think for sure. But yeah, it's checkpleasecomic.com. It's an NSAID, safer than Advil for daily use and so far better. That's awesome. I took a gram of naproxen a day for like 10 years before I got proper treatment for my rheumatoid arthritis. And luckily, I still appear to have a stomach lining. The combination of that and eating raw habaneros for breakfast every day, and I still have a stomach lining. I don't know how I managed it. I did always eat it with food. Always take my naproxen with food, but yeah, it's really a horrific amount that I consumed. The size, format, and layout, I think it's just a graphic novel. I don't think it's a manga. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. I think it is Check Please season. I think it's Check Please season. I need to read like a fun, queer, figure skating, hockey player romance. All right, y'all. I should probably go. What else are people looking forward to this week? Puppy class, haircuts, new pain meds, always very exciting. Reading Check Please, it sounds like multiple of us. And I'm looking forward to this event. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Let me know if you think I should go to Shenzhen and attempt to speed run the transit system. And until next week, stay safe, stay hydrated, pet a cat if you have one available, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!